complete when he sees his own image reflected in the silver. That sounds just like God. He puts us in the trial and takes us out, looking at us on every occasion until he looks at us and sees his image. God has a way of refining his children. God refines us for his purposes by allowing us to go through tests. Your purpose is to glorify God, but God often works by developing your character first. Joseph's integrity must be tested to help him prepare for his purpose and all that God has in store. God is taking us somewhere, and the tests are meant to develop our faith and strengthen us for all that lies ahead. God has a purpose for our lives, but we must be prepared for it. My son recently turned 16. He was so excited about learning to drive, but he also understood that before he could drive, he had to first pass the written test and the driving test. The driving test was the most challenging part because the person administering the test gets in the car and gives various directions that he had to follow. It is only successful when he's able to complete all the driving maneuvers so he can then pass and get his driver's license. He was so excited when he was able to pass the test. Sometimes life is just like that. Times when God steps in and tells us to go this way or that way, and we only pass when we follow his instructions. Joseph has already been tested in multiple ways, but in Genesis chapter 39, his integrity is tested. Always remember that your integrity and your character matter. The text describes Joseph in verse 6 as a handsome and well-built man. Here is a gifted, hardworking, and good-looking young man. He's already experienced success, but his looks makes him doubly vulnerable. Dr. E.K. Bailey once said, high visibility leads to high vulnerability. Joseph was ripe for the attack. Temptation for him shows up in verse 7 when Potiphar's wife comes to him and tells him, let's have sex. He must face the ongoing temptation of his boss's wife trying to seduce him. She is texting him, sliding in his DMs, sending him pics, coming by his cubicle, pretending she needs help. She wants one thing, she wants sex with him. Joseph is tested by her, and she is relentless. She won't take no for an answer, but she keeps pressing him every day. Have you ever noticed that tests on our integrity can be relentless? They never stop. They seem to come every single day. We're tempted to sin sexually, tempted to steal, tempted to be prideful, tempted to lie or to be greedy, tempted to say, I deserve all of this, or even to justify our sin. We all know what it's like to experience relentless temptation, to settle for less than what God has called us to. We know what it's like to be tempted to sell our integrity for a cheap substitute. Listen to Joseph's answer to her. But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? He refused her. He first of all said, I don't want to let my master down. I don't want to let people down. One of the great deterrents to sin is to consider the impact. When I was in seminary, one of my professors gave us an exercise to imagine that you have committed adultery, and now I want you to think about the people that have been impacted by your decision. He had us write out what we would say to our spouse, our children, our church, our extended family. It was a heartbreaking exercise, but it was designed to help us to think about the impact of our sin. Sin never just affects us alone, but it always affects others. I don't want to sin against God. It's the second thing that Joseph says. He says, I don't want to let God down. How can I do such a wicked thing and sin against the God that has been present in my life? His heart is in the right place. I pray that when we face temptation, that our hearts may be in the same place. I don't want to let people down, and I don't want to dishonor God. Joseph keeps to the plan until one day everyone is gone. And she decides tonight's the night. She gets aggressive, grabs his robe, and tries to make him have sex with her. Joseph breaks free, runs, but she tears his robe as he tries to leave. And then she lies to her husband and tells him that Joseph tried to rape her. Her husband sends Joseph to jail with this false allegation. Not only does he have to deal with flirtations, but he also has to face the challenge of being falsely accused. A false case is raised against him, and Joseph is faced with the struggle, trying to defend himself against someone that has lied on him. One would think he would be rewarded for withstanding her temptations, but instead, the tests continue. It's a great test of character to be falsely accused of something and endure the public shame of something you know you didn't do. And worse yet, he's punished for it. He receives a prison sentence for something he did not do. He's the victim of an unjust justice system. Unfortunately, in our country, far too many people of color know this experience. Being falsely accused is an incredibly challenging test. When someone seeks to damage your name and reputation, or attempts to hurt you, your family, your church, your business, or something you love, it can be incredibly painful. There may be times in life where you will be falsely accused, and you will have to sit through it until your name is cleared, but the residue sometimes remains. In some seasons, you will have to outlive the rumor. Rumors and gossip will happen around your name. You will have to face the challenge of living through this, through the scrutiny, through the whispers, and through the attacks. You can only imagine the variety of emotions that Joseph must go through as he deals with the accusation. There he sits in prison. Something unusual happens. The Lord was with him, and he showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. He was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Again, God's purposes shine through in the life of Joseph. He is placed in charge again. He finds himself in leadership again. Not that he applied for it or sought it out, but because the Lord was with him and it was given to him. And the warden pays no attention to what's under Joseph's care. Just like Potiphar's house, now in prison, the same sequence of events is happening because the Lord was with Joseph. Joseph perseveres despite his circumstances and ends up in charge. The original dream of Joseph leading is slowly showing up in smaller ways. Joseph is not in the best circumstance, but despite his circumstances, his gifts, talents, and experiences continue to shine, and he is elevated. God gave him success, and others know that the Lord is with Joseph. It is obvious to all, even in prison, he is prosperous. God's hand stays upon his life. He may be in an uncomfortable place, but even there, God is with him and still working toward his purpose. Someone today can testify that when you have a purpose on your life, even through the test, God stayed with you and continues to bless you. My wife and I, we recently celebrated 25 years of marriage. And sometime during that week, I just began to take out my phone and I began to write some of the tests we faced over the 25 years. I thought about some of the parenting challenges and crises we faced raising our kids. I thought about how we had a surprise pregnancy and had to walk through that together. I thought about her parents' divorce and the death of my father. And I thought about the moments of losing our grandparents and career issues and trying to pastor and be in the public spotlight and live and raise our kids and all the tensions. And I thought about ministry and some betrayals and challenges we've had and financial issues. God has seen us through so many tests over these 25 years, and the truth be told, I believe there are even more tests that lie ahead. But here's what I've learned about God. God stays with you through the tests, that God will see you through them. Even in the moments where I failed or we fail, he even redeems our failures so that we can fail forward. I close by telling you about my grandmother when she was tested. It was in August of 2010. My family had been caring for her. She was 86 years old at the time. She had been battling cancer. She lived alone in San Antonio, Texas. And so each of us, myself, my mom, and my two brothers, we would take turns going to care for her. They never thought she would make it out the hospital, but she did. They never thought she would make it out of ICU, but she did. They never thought she would make it off the respirator, but she did. They never thought she would make it out of the rehab center, but she did. They never thought she would make it off oxygen, but she did. They never thought she would be able to live on her own again, but she did. The Lord saw her, saw us through her tests, giving her another 4 good years before calling her home. And I spoke to her during one of our visits before she passed, and I asked her, I said, Grandma, how are you doing? And she replied in her raspy voice, I'm thankful because I never would have made it this far without him. He's a good God. Oh, yes, he is. It reminds me of that passage in Psalm 107, verses 1, 2, and 3. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. Those he redeemed from the hand of the foe, those he gathered from the lands from east and west. Know this, God will see you through your tests.